Next we have the carbon cycle. The carbon cycle is an important part of our lives because we do need carbon to live. It is an organic molecule, which means that it's used to make macromolecules that is a critical component to life. So carbon is going to cycle between all of the different spheres of the earth, just like with water. Um, so there are a couple ways that carbon can be introduced to a system. Most carbon is stored in the geosphere in rocks and fossil fuels deep within the earth. Another source of carbon would be sea life and sea creatures and their shells. And when they die, they create a thick carbon layer below at the surface of, or I'm sorry, at the bottom of the ocean, which can be used to make coral reefs or limestones, carbon-rich rocks and organisms. So this carbon that's stored in the geosphere can be released when we have volcanic eruptions. It can be released when we burn fossil fuels, and it can be released in a sea-air exchange, which would be a process by removing it from Earth's oceans as well and putting it into the atmosphere. So those would include ways that we are having carbon emitted into the atmosphere. Carbon can also be emitted by ourselves because in the process of respiration, when we breathe out, we are releasing carbon dioxide, just like any organism that goes through the process of respiration would. So those are some ways that carbon is going to leave the geosphere, the biosphere, or the hydrosphere and make its way to the atmosphere, which is of course where we don't want the majority of our carbon to be, because carbon in the atmosphere is a greenhouse gas. So some ways that carbon can be taken out of the atmosphere, we have photosynthesis of terrestrial plants. And plants, of course, use carbon dioxide to go through the process of photosynthesis and then release it as a byproduct of oxygen, oxygen being the byproduct. We also can remove carbon through the process of uplifting, which is going to be kind of a complex rock formation process for geology. Let me scoot the screen down. Oops. And once it's returned to the rocks and soils, carbon that's in soil can be used through microbial respiration and decomposition. So we have bacteria and things and other microbes in the soil that are breaking carbon down. And we can also absorb some carbon through weathering of rocks being returned to the soil. Some of those rocks contain carbon. Of course, this also releases some to the atmosphere as well. Marine photosynthesis is another way to remove carbon, and so just note that there are several ways to remove carbon from the atmosphere, several ways to release carbon to the atmosphere. Carbon is going to continue to cycle throughout history, and most predominantly, the total amount of carbon is not changing. It's just the location in which that carbon is stored is changing. As we use more fossil fuels, we're taking more of that safely stored carbon beneath the earth and releasing it to the atmosphere as CO2.